G'day, Ben from Melbourne here. Gonna do a video on my favourite 50 Australian punk records. This idea was influenced by Jockwim from MiddleLifeCrisisRants and Vinyl Richie, who've had a bit of back and forth with their videos. Jockwim started off with his top 50 American punk albums, and then Vinyl Richie answered that with his favourite US punk albums, and then quickly followed that up with his favourite UK punk albums, which then Jockwim responded to that as well. And fantastic lists, both of them. And what I really liked about them is they stretched the limits of what punk was. And I think a lot of what they put in there was things with the punk ethic as well. Like, because punk is definitely not like a definite sound, I would say. Like, if you can call, the Clash, Television, the Ramones, Wire, and all of that stuff punk, that's like fits a broad spectrum of sounds just in those 3 or 4 bands. So yeah, I liked how Vinyl Richie put in bands like the Butthole Surfers. I love how Jockwim mentioned early Cure as well. I think they're all intrinsic to the story of punk and how it evolved. So of course, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and do my favourite Australian punk records. Now you notice I'm calling them records, not albums, because I'm not going to be strict like them and just stick to the album format, because I think there's a lot of important 7 inches of songs by bands which never released a full-length album, which I think were very important to adding to the Australian punk scene. And also there's going to be, I think, 1 CD in there as well. So, and some other formats, like I think a few mini albums and that. But I just really think that in this case it tells a bigger story. Of course, you're gonna argue with me of what I left out, and that is for 2 reasons. Either I don't have it, or I just don't like it. So you're just gonna have to deal with that. This is my list of my favourite Australian punk bands. I've tried to put it in some kind of order from 50 down to 1. It's incredibly hard to rate one band against another of any type of music at all, because I like stuff for different reasons, as we all do. So anyway, this will be a big video. I've already been rhubarbing on for 3 minutes, so I'm just going to show 3 special mentions which just got pipped at the post. First one is The Butcher Shop with Hard For You, which is, of course, sort of a super group of sorts, which had Tex Perkins from B Suburban, an import. He's over here so much and had such an intrinsic link to Australian music. We'll call Kid Congo Powers Australian for the sake of this argument. Who else in this band? Billy Palmer Jr., who was in the Johnnies with Spencer P. Jones. Yeah, this is, again, already breaking the rules. This is like a 12-inch. And it's got the song, of course, Hard For You, which ended up later on a B Suburban record. But great record. Also, The Eastern Dark, Long Live the New Flesh. One of the many fantastic waterfront bands, which was a Sydney-based label in the 80s. Really great stuff. I would love to put this in, but you just can't have them all. And lastly, the wonderful Bludgeoning, Feed Time. So probably more in the noise rock end of the scale of punk, but their album Billy, I think, is worthy of a mention as well. Anyway, that's the 3. Let's get into the top 50, starting at 50, and I will stop counting from this point on because I always lose track of where I'm at. I do know there are 50 records here though. So first of all, dun, da, da, EML The Sniffers. Yes, surprise, surprise. I've said many a derogatory thing about this band because I think they've become a one-trick pony and pretty boring to me now after an initial really exciting burst, which was this one, The Big Attraction and Giddy Up, which were the two EPs which I think they released on cassette and digitally, put together by Richie at Homeless Records. And long story short, they were pretty asshole-ish about what they did next. I'll just keep it at that. So it's not just a musical thing for me. This was genuinely an exciting burst of punk rock in Melbourne, and I saw them early on, and they were really, really good fun live. But they kind of, to me, it seems like they've become an act, and they want to be a bit like Cosmic Psychos, who I think are superior at the pub rock. But this was generally excited, so I'll leave that at that, or we're going to be here forever. Now, only on to 49, and we're already cheating with 3 records, which I think were huge in the story of punk over here. And of course, the compilation Before Birdmen Flew. There's 4 volumes of this, and it's Australian beat, R&B and garage punk from 65 to 67. So this is probably like your Pebbles and Back from the Grave and stuff like this. So you can't tell me things like Black Diamonds, I Want, Need, Love You don't have that punk edge to it. I think this is, without this stuff, Stephen the Board's version of Rosalind, fantastic. The old Seed song. Really, these were released by, I think, Raven Records in the 80s. A lot of people wanted to know what came before our punk scene with the Saints and Radio Birdman, of course. And another one of those great, this is all 49, by the way, comps, is Ugly Things, covering more of that amazing late 60s garage punk scene. And one more of even a more obscure stuff called It's a Cave In from similar era. Well worth checking these out if you like your 60s garage punk. Right, now back to a legitimate album. Melbourne's Bat Piss at number 48 with their third and seemingly last record, Rest in Piss. This is just like slabs of huge guitar sounds. It's kind of murky, swampy, but it's got that punk edge. Like just the opener, Black Paint. It's an instrumental, but it just sets the stage for what is like a great primal, swampy. I've already said that. Kind of noise rock punk record. Really good record. This one came out in 2017, so not an old one, but a friggin' classic. Now, a little bit before that, in 1996, is the Sea Scouts, which was the band formed by Tim Evans after his mighty Tasmanian band, Mouth. Now, this one is getting more into the terrain of like your birthday party and sort of that art punk sound. Also a bit of Scientist I hear in here as well. Fantastic debut called Pattern of Recognition, and if you turn it on the side you can see that that's actually his bank statement with all of his social security or dole checks going in there. Great record from back in 96. Next up, another more modern one. They've just released a new one, the Straight Arrows. This is a previous one on top, and this, I think, was just a perfect distillation of what they'd done before on the 2 records. It's probably a little bit sharper, better songs, more hooks. Definitely a nod to the 60s. This is more like that garage punk with catchy choruses, cool guitar hooks. Also a son of a member of the Atlantic, so some good lineage there in this band. Next one up is None, which was on Art Records. This is 2014, and this is like almost impenetrable synth punk record. Not a guitar in sight on this. It's all analog synths and drum machines, and yeah, great. Jenny, let me just double check. Jenny Brannigan on lead vocals in this one. Really good. If you like that dark synthy with a punk edge to it, you will love None. This is their debut. They released another one. Again, another band. I think they've moved on to other things since then, but both records, but this is a particular banger. Next up, back in the snotty garage punk stuff of the wonderful Living Eyes, led by the great Billy Gardner, who also runs that Anti-Fade record, which has been a great label for promoting lots of Australian punk and garage and stuff like that, which has come out in the last 10 to 15 years. This is the Living Eyes debut, just good snotty punk with attitude and hooks and catchiness. This one came out in 2012, I think, 2012, 2013. And of course, it was recorded by Mikey Young, whose name is on every record ever released in the last 15 years. Right, now for some more modern punks with the Oz Mutants, who, I think I got this the wrong way around, that way, on Art Records. Now, there were members of this band, played with Billy Gardner and also Zach from Orb in a band called Frowning Clouds. I think it was Jake from, let me check, Jake Robertson, who played in the Frowning Clouds with those two. Now, Oz Mutants is kind of like hectic. It's got guitars, synths, kind of like an amped up Devo, I suppose, but a bit much more angry and sometimes just completely silly, but really good, tight blast of weird, quirky, jerky punk. Next up, kind of like hard rock punk. I suppose it's more in the rock and roll type of thing, and this is the Pape Temple with their second album, Tales. I see that they're reissuing these. This one, and I think the third one. Just trying to get a year for you. Unfortunately doesn't say on this one, but I reckon it would be at least, I don't know, 6 years old maybe. And this has got, if just go listen to the song Carol and tell me that that's not a ripping punk sing-along rockin' song. Next, a bit of a classic from the 90s, the Powder Monkeys, Smashed on a Knee. This is a band led by Tim Hemmensley, who was previously in the Mighty God and spent a little bit of time in Bored as well, in a later configuration of that band. This is very much coming from that, I guess, Detroit big riff fuzz bass sound of, Proto Punk and that kind of MC5, Stooges, and then later on filtered through Radio Birdman and that whole scene. This is a classic Australian record, Smashed on a Knee. Pick it up if you can. Next, this is just proving how great the modern scene in Australia is. This is Bad Dreams, spelt DREEMS if you're looking for it. And this is their latest record, Hoo Ha, which came out 2023. Now, this is full of punk energy. It's got that particularly Australian punk sound to it, which has, I don't know how to describe it. There's a certain thing about Australian guitar sound in punk music, which I don't think anywhere else has. which really makes it stand out. And what I really like about this one is this is like, it really takes a stab at Australian culture. They're also pointing the finger back at themselves because if they're like regular middle class white blokes who love a beer and, you know, the thing that everyone else, but they're also trying to look harder at, you know, how privileged we are. And there's a lot of great stuff about trying to acknowledge, you know, our first peoples, in the indigenous population to this country originally, and doing it in a really smart way, not like sloganeering or clunky or anything like that. It's fantastic record. Just like listen to the track Jack and you will get a good idea of what I'm talking about. Killer record. They had a few before this which were all good, but it really come together on this one. Next we've got Civic. This is one of my albums of the year a couple of years back, produced by the mighty Rob Younger from Radio Birdman. And this is a nod to a lot of classic Australian punk. You will hear those sounds in there, but they take it, run with that, and add their own spin to it. Like, really great record, really well constructed songs. They even do a great cover of Wars or Hands of Time by the Masters Apprentices. Great 60s, early 70s Australian band. Probably a bit garage punky, and then went to a more traditional rock thing in the 70s. This is just a killer record. Followed by another one of my albums of the year for 2022, Split Systems Volume 1. This just can't be beat. This is just a killer punk record. I've actually, from showing this, made some of my US friends probably pay exorbitant shipping fees to get this record to them because they've ordered it off Bandcamp. If you don't trust me, trust a whole stack of your compatriots, whether if you're from the US or the UK, because a lot of ears opened this up and got their asses kicked. Next, what we would call, I suppose, a Proto Punk album by the Coloured Balls with their record Heavy Metal Kid. Not much heavy metal to be heard on this, but it is heavy duty stuff. Lobby Lloyd led this band. He's like the guitar god of Australia, who was in great 60s bands like the Wild Cherries and the Purple Hearts. Also spent some time in Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs. More rockin' period in the early 70s, but this is like a proto-punk record, I would call it. It's just got that hard edge sound, no frills, which reminds me of punk. Like, it's just straight to the point, driving rhythms, really a lot of attitude as well. Like, great early 70s Australian record. I could have chosen Ball Power, their first record, but I have shown that quite a few times, and I think the follow-up is just as good. Righto. Voight, what are they called? 465. It's an Australian post-punk band, I suppose, which were based in Sydney. This was their one and only record. They were really influenced by like kraut rock. They recorded this album just before they fell apart in 1979. This is like a self-funded record. They were very much part of that do-it-yourself ethic of punk rock. Really cool stuff. Kind of a forgotten band, but this was reissued a few years back on the label Mental Experience. Like, this collects the album and I think a 7-inch as well on here, between 78 and 79. Voight 465. Slights Still Unspoken. Next, we're going to go for a CD. We mentioned Tim Evans earlier with the band Sea Scouts. This is the one and only Mouth, and as far as I know, the only thing they ever released with this CD, Victim Chant, and this is a fantastic punk record. I saw their final gig when I first moved to Melbourne in the early 90s, and it just blew my mind. The the way this guy controlled the feedback on his guitar and the way he just spat out the lyrics of those songs, it was great. And they're great songs as well, really good sound. Pity that they only released one thing. As far as I know, they only reissued this CD once. This is the CD from back in the day. I don't know how gettable this is. You can probably hear it online. The only fault, I suppose, with this is there are one or two songs which are a touch like heart's in the right spot, but a little bit clunky, sloganeering, kind of obvious stuff. But musically, can't be beat. Okay, next up we've got the Thought Criminals. These were Sydney punks formed around 77. They were all done by 81. They had like an angular, quirky, fast style of punk rock. Of course, the name comes from George Orwell's 1984 book with, unapproved thoughts. They were thought criminals kind of thing. Again, another do-it-yourself ethic punk band, to the point that they formed their own label called Doublethink, and also were big in having an agency like to provide recording and live performance opportunities for other bands of the era. Like, great record. Again, another forgotten punk classic. Righto, the next one is going to be controversial because a lot of people are not going to say this is punk, and even the band would argue they're not punk, but I would compare this to like how there are punk elements in the first Iron Maiden record and early Motorhead record. They're definitely rock and roll records, but there's a punk edge to these records. Even if they don't realize they're doing it. And to me, it's in the no frills, straight to the point attitude of the playing. It's not pretty, it's hard and fast, and well, what more can I say than just say AC/DC is Power Age. Argue with me as much as you like, but you'd be wrong. Okay, now for a 7-inch. And that is one from a little while back, on Anti-Fade. I'd say this might be 10-15 years old, by Russ Deschain's Hurricanes, and that's the great single The Jailbird. Just reverb to shit guitars, which just like garage punk attitude, of course on Anti-Fade, and of course mastered by Mikey Young. Killer tune. Bit of a classic here with the Screaming Tribesmen, more on the end of like probably catchy stuff like Igloo. This was like, I think, a pretty well-known single of theirs. Great band, but I think that this single on Citadel sums up, what they're about, writing catchy songs. And it's definitely like there's a punk influence in there, even though it's probably a bit more catchy than most, and they're shooting for the stars in a lot of ways. We're up to like 25 minutes, so, and I don't even know what I'm up to, so I'm just going to do a couple more, and then we might have a part 2 of this. So the next one is Public Execution. This is like one of the earliest examples in Australia of hardcore punk, and in all places it was Brisbane, up in Queensland. This was like a fresh breed coming through after the initial 77 crowd. And I like this, like Public Execution formed as a 3-piece to kick the old punk dinosaurs fair in the ass, amping up the speed and aggression and letting them know about it. Which I find funny because it's literally 2 years later than the 77 punks, and they're already considered old farts. But anyway, they added a 4th member after an initial 7-inch and released a demo tape, which is now this album, which also adds the 7-inch. So it's, this is fantastic, from 1983, I think it is. Just short, sharp blasts of punk fury and killer stuff. Now, Proto Punk, big influence. I say that they get in here because the Saints covered one of their songs on their debut record, and that, of course, is The Missing Links. And the Saints covered Wild About You, and their other probably most famous song is Driving Me Insane on here. This is one of the few garage punk bands of the late 60s where the whole record kicks ass. A lot of those bands are usually like a few strong songs and then a few trying to get hits and that. But this was a reissue on Sundays from a few years back. 60s garage punk at its finest. And we'll do just one more with the mighty Division 4, a Perth band from 1983. Recorded 6 songs on a cassette and then just faded into obscurity. So, bit of a shame. It's like a dryly recorded record, throbby, dubby, paranoid synth attack. So pretty early on with the synth punk there in 83. Kind of, like been interesting to see what could have happened if they stuck together, but they probably would have faced a bit of animosity just within the punk crowd, let alone music world in general, having synths at that stage. But yeah, this is really good and glad that it saw the light of day on Smart Guy Records. This was, did I already say this is 83? Let's say that they're kind of like Oi Division. And I'm going to leave you with that bad joke, and I'll see you in part 2 real soon.